I'm really pleased to be joined by my next guest. We have met each other actually on X through a mutual interest in General Michael Flynn, somebody that I believe we both previously had some respect for. I'm talking about Scott McMahan. Scott, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. Thank you so much for bringing me, Jason. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, and I mean,
Yeah, I would
this is one. Sorry.
I would say yes, I did. I had no problem whatsoever with Flynn. I respected him. I thought he was exactly who he said he was before I really started looking into what was going on within state parties. And that ultimately led me to see that he was involved in causing the division that we've seen there.
Yeah, and I want to make sure that people watching understand that this is not about bashing Michael Flynn. Neither Scott nor I decided we don't like Flynn and started getting into all this. We've had a few discussions. Scott and I don't know each other very well, but people I think are aware of Scott and his work. He's got the Bigger Truth show, and people can follow him on X at Bigger Truth. I'm delighted that we are simulcasting today's live stream. So viewers on X can see that on Scott's X channel. You can watch it, of course, on my X channel at JG_CSTT. And Scott, I'm really pleased because, I'm looking forward to doing a series with you on this. You've done so much great research. Every time I read your X feed, I'm learning things about General Flynn that I didn't know. So after this introduction here, you and I are going to go through a bunch of stuff here on YouTube and X and Rumble and everything. But then people are going to be able to join us for an in-depth conversation in what I hope will be the first in a series. People are going to be able to watch on biggertruthmedia.com. That is your website and also your Substack page. People who are subscribed to Scott on Substack are going to be able to watch this sponsor exclusive episode in what will be the first in a new series. Of course, Crowdsource the Truth sponsors will also be able to see it on odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth, crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com, and all the other channels. But Scott, I've got so many questions for you. So you've acknowledged that we both started out liking Flynn. I'm a Trump supporter, Trump voter. Flynn was down with Trump. I was like, okay, fine, let's smash the deep state. But what happened for you? How did you first start to realize Michael Flynn maybe wasn't what he presented himself to be?
Yeah, I was a small town reporter in Michigan and tried to figure out why the Michigan Republican Party was so divided, especially heading into this critical election year. And it was so divided that there was a fight to try to remove the state party chair, Christina Caramo, and who I thought that she was who she said she was, which was, a Christian kind of grassroots conservative. And what I discovered, I had multiple whistleblowers come to me who had direct experience with Christina Caramo and her handler, who had self-professed ties to the intelligence community. And it turned out that there were also financial and other ties with the America Project, which is an organization that's run by Mike Flynn and Joe Flynn and Patrick Byrne. Now, Mike Flynn is no longer directly involved, but Joe Flynn, as of the most recent filing, Joe Flynn and Patrick Byrne were both directors. And there was a grant of $700,000 from that organization to another organization that was headed by kind of the lieutenants in Christina Caramo's organization. And what I started looking at was the language that they were using and how they were manipulating people, and they really drew them into an organization that meets all of the objective criteria of a cult,
Right.
pseudo-religious cult. And they claim Christian nationalism, which before I started looking into this, I just kind of thought, because I'm a born again Christian, I thought, okay, I'm a Christian and I'm not a globalist, so I'm a nationalist. So boom, I'm a Christian nationalist. And a lot of people thought the same thing.
You're joking, but they could and would use that as a predicate to kick in your door or do whatever they want.
Yeah, exactly. But what I discovered, even as looking at this, is one, these people who claim to be Christian nationalists are the most hateful people within the party. I mean, they absolutely espouse hatred towards everybody that doesn't agree with them, not just ideologically, but votes with them collectively. It's a collectivist cult. And so they, not only are they marked by hatred, and Jesus says, "By their fruits you will know them," but they desire openly to make this a Christian country, a Christian nation. And there's only two ways to do that, because until Jesus returns, the Bible says we're never going to have a Christian nation. There's never going to be all Christians. And so there's only two ways to do that. Either you kick out all the people, use the murderous power of government to kick out everybody that's not a Christian, or you use the murderous power of government to force everybody to make a false profession of Christ. And
Seems that hasn't worked out well in the past when they've tried to do those things.
It completely, and they call themselves constitutionalists, but it's completely unconstitutional, and it is 100% non-Christian. So, and this is they use the same narratives. They really look to Flynn, and a lot of this, where I really started, and where my spidey senses really started picking up. I wrote my first paper about a report on Flynn, and I believe it was March or April, but I think it was May 9th when Flynn released his movie. That was the release date of his movie. And that movie really, it was not marketed towards a general audience at that point. The audience for that movie, the intended audience, was the precinct delegates and committeemen in state Republican parties across the country. And that was really significant. I mean, they were looking at, they were the people who were promoting it were their operatives within state parties. It was really oriented and directed towards the state parties. And at the same time,
wait a minute. This is a complex. I'm not sure I fully grasped that. So give us that again.
Yeah. So that when Flynn released his movie, it wasn't, although, there was marketing online, general marketing on X and online and stuff. The real target market, as they were doing their bus tour and traveling around the country, was not just all Americans. It was not all conservatives. They were specifically targeting precinct delegates and precinct committeemen within state Republican parties.
And why? What's the purpose of that? This movie is to convince them to do what?
Well, it's to convince them that Flynn is an American hero and a patriot, and it is very difficult to show someone, to convince someone who has seen this movie, because it's such effective propaganda, and it's revisionist history too. But it's very difficult to convince somebody who has seen it that Flynn is not who he says he is. It's very emotionally manipulative.
Right.
It's a very effective, very highly polished piece of propaganda. Right. And so it's really this was part of, Roger Stone said multiple times on X that they were running a contingency campaign for Flynn for president.
Yeah, he did say that, didn't he?
Yes. And
now, see, but I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but there was that other thing where Flynn, his name appeared as the vice president on an FEC filing. Did you ever find out what that was about?
Yeah. And I think that that came in response to my reporting, and a report that a Washington Post reporter who used my reporting as one of her sources did in relation to a training meeting for national delegates. So back up just a little bit. Before the movie came out, I started to realize how it was really strangely important to Flynn's operatives and state parties who would be the national delegates, the delegates to the national convention. So each state party, they have an internal election to determine who's going to be the delegates to the national convention. And it was weird how important it was to them, to these cults within state parties, who was going to be those national delegates. They really wanted not just people that they aligned with, but actually their trained operatives, the people, and they are chaos agents. They train in Antifa type methods and Saul Alinsky tactics. They talk about using Saul Alinsky tactics against the left, but they never actually attack Democrats. They only ever attack Republicans. They call them rhinos. And this is talking about people who are volunteers within the party. that are not rhinos. These are people who they always target the most experienced and effective people who know how to get Republicans elected. And these people are like the engine and the the fuel within the Republican Party that run elections. And these cult organizations, these Christian nationalist cult organizations that are loyal to Flynn, they do everything they can to make their lives hell. And they torment them, they slander them, they attack them, they sue them.
Lawsuits, I'm sure. Yeah.
It's lawfare. It's it's all by any means necessary is really their mantra, to get them either to step down or to remove them from their positions within the party.
But
So
isn't this what every kind of political operative does? I mean, this seems to be what people do. I'm not diminishing it, but it's almost like there's an entire industry that does this that regular people don't know about.
yes, so certainly, if you want to get involved, as if you want to become a politician within, whether it's Democrat or Republican, the best way to do that, if you don't have political experience, is to get involved in the party and learn about what it takes to run a campaign and help candidates to get elected and all that. And so the parties are training grounds for political candidates. And, that's part of the purpose of it. But they're also, they're by nature kind of a grassroots organization. You learn about not just politics, but, how a party actually works, and how candidates, you get to know the candidates a lot closer by working within the party. And you just kind of get more information about what's happening in the country, and, kind of behind the scenes in politics. So, I think it's good to get involved in the party if you have that interest. But these people, what the difference here is that there are gatekeepers, and these gatekeepers, they all were new. Almost all of them are new in 2021. And it coincides with Steve Bannon on February 6, 2021, after spending the previous 8 to 10 weeks telling people, really indoctrinating people in rhino hatred. After the 2020 election, that was Bannon's, and I was a daily listener then of Steve Bannon. And that was his overriding message, was rhino hatred, blaming Mike Pence and the rhinos for not, preventing the steal, not stopping the steal. It was all the rhinos' fault. And so they, on February 6th, a couple weeks after Biden's inauguration, they presented what was the only solution that made sense to people, which was get involved in the party. And, the way he presented it, he had Dan Schultz on his show with the Precinct Strategy, who is an Army intelligence officer. And they came on, he came on Bannon's show, and they said, the way to save the country is to get off the couch, stop grabbing your popcorn, get out there and become a precinct delegate or committeeman and kick out all the rhinos, take over the party and kick out all the rhinos. But it was a fundamental misunderstanding that they're promoting of what the precinct delegate is, because it's a volunteer position where you get together to do the work, because it's work, it's a responsibility. It's not a position of entitlement.
What do they do? Most people don't know, I think.
Right. Just very simply, the doors in your precinct. So every state has a different number of precincts per or doors per precinct delegate.
What do you mean doors?
Neighbors, homes.
Just knocking on people's houses to raise money.
Well, and to tell them to vote, to remind them to vote. So within your precinct, there's a certain number of those doors are going to be, they rate them on a scale of 1 to 4. So 4s would be regular Republican voters that get out and vote in every election. 3s would be occasional Republican voters, known Republicans. 2s would be, occasional Democrat or independent voters. And 1s would be people that you can't persuade because, so they're not, you don't bother knocking on their doors because they're hardcore Democrats.
Isn't it amazing that in 2024, they're still actually knocking on people's doors? If somebody came knocking on my door, I'd be more likely to chase them away with a bat than answer their questions about politics.
Yeah, that may be in New York City, but especially in flyover country, that is how campaigns are run. You cannot win an election, whether it's local or national level, without getting out and knocking on people's doors, and because people want to know who it is that they're voting for. And so this is an opportunity to if you're a precinct delegate, you're representing the candidates and you're representing the party. as you're knocking on these doors. So that, I mean, that's the main responsibility. And it's also, to be informed and to educate your neighbors and stuff like that about what's going on.
But so the upshot of what you're telling us is Flynn recruited like a large number of people to be these door knocking delegates to promote the idea of a Flynn presidency, because we didn't know. There was a lot of touch and go there where Trump might have gone to jail and stuff like that. And then the thing that's really particularly interesting about this filing on the FEC website, I mean, if it was some kind of error, what is it doing still sitting there? I mean, this isn't like some document that I created. This is FEC.gov. And this went on there 11 days before they tried to kill Trump. So it just kind of reeks of if nobody knew about this and then Trump was killed and then Flynn shows up like, oh, well, I was supposed to be the vice president. Let's get Mike Pompeo and me and let's take over or something. I mean, is that what they were trying to do? What the hell is this FEC filing?
Yeah, well, it's a forgery because it's not searchable on their search engine.
What do you mean?
If you search for it on the FEC search engine, you search for that pack, it doesn't show up.
How could they forge it? This is FEC.gov. How could they have it there?
Somebody with access to their website put it on there, but it's a forgery.
But I mean, isn't this like a huge felony? This is a government website and this thing is just dangling here. Nobody's looking at it.
Yeah, it's not an actual filing.
That's crazy. So why would they do that? Who did that?
I don't know. I mean, somebody with access to the FEC website, or because it's even still there, is even more mysterious.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was a fake, and that.
How do you know that? Just because it can't be searched?
That doesn't. The organization doesn't exist.
What's the organization here?
It's that the
Flynn 2024.
Exactly.
Bulldog Compliance. See, I did look into Bulldog Compliance. That's owned by Charles somebody.
That's right. They exist. All of the names, phone numbers, and addresses on there are legit. But the people that are involved deny that the organization exists, and you can't find the organization through any search.
Something weird with this, Scott. We got to keep looking at that. All right. Yeah. So basically, So Trump loses. Flynn gets into rhino hatred. But what about that turned you to think there was something wrong going on?
Yeah. So what they were promoting was not the idea that you become a precinct delegate and you get to work and you help Republicans get elected. What they're promoting is this other idea of being a precinct delegate. All you have to do is just go to a few meetings a year, vote the way we tell you to. We'll take over the party and we'll kick out all the rhinos, and then we'll save the country for future generations. That was their pitch. And so what they attracted was angry and low information people that they could manipulate and control. And so then they had this network, just like what we see in the way that he created this Flynn network of independent podcasters, which I think is obvious to anybody that really looks at it, right? Because they all parrot the same narratives. You can go on X. If you watch X, you watch something that Flynn posts, that narrative is going to filter and recycle through all of these independent podcasters. And it's Ann Vandersteel, Nino, all these people, and it's going to go to Behizzi, and it's also going to go through the Flynn network also influences or controls all of these accounts that are like Ivanka Trump News, Donald Trump News, all the Flynn family. They all have these accounts that are like at something news, and they're all fake. And I think they're all controlled by the Flynn network. They're not controlled by it doesn't represent the people that we think that they represent.
I agree with you. And I don't want to focus on this guy for any reason other than he's come up before. I don't even know him, but this boxer, David Nino Rodriguez, he first came to my attention when Robert David Steele allegedly died. And I mean, look, anybody could look at me and say, hey, this guy was making 3D movies and now he's a journalist, but that's a little different than being a heavyweight boxer. I don't know that this is the typical career path for somebody after a boxing career to become a journalist, but maybe it is. The issue that I had was he was the first one to release the report that Robert David Steele had died. And the issue that I had was they said that Robert David Steele had been checked into a hospital and put onto a ventilator, to treat him for COVID-19, and that as a result of that, he died. But the problem is the evidence presented shows him not on a ventilator, but a respirator. So I said, well, wait a minute. We've got conflicting evidence here. That's a bit contradictory. Let me call this Nino Rodriguez and ask him what the hell he's talking about. And he was just very difficult to get on the phone. And I mean, I've gotten Alan Dershowitz on the phone. I've gotten Brett and Eric Weinstein, Daniel Ellsberg. There's a long list of people I've been able to, I can't tell you how many people in Congress have said to me, how did you get this number? But not Nino Rodriguez. I couldn't get that guy on the phone.
I've got his number if you want it.
It's pointless to call him now, but the point is he was obviously, as you're saying, that these guys put out coordinated information. Somebody was putting out this information that X, Y, or Z had allegedly happened to Robert David Steele. Now, I don't believe he's actually dead. He got himself wound up in a bunch of sort of a legal morass, if you will, with me. And what's interesting, I think I might have forgotten to tell you this in our lengthy conversations about Robert David Steele, but he ran a nonprofit called the Earth Intelligence Network. And it was a big focus of the lawsuits that he brought against me because I had determined, or at least I had seen evidence in the public domain that caused me to believe that this thing was engaged in charity fraud. And what's super interesting about it is I started tangling with Robert David Steele in 2017. And you may notice that this thing didn't make a lot of money. It made so little money all of these years that it just filed a postcard, the 990EZ. And then in 2014, it took in 64,000. 2015, 25,000. When he starts dealing with me, he has his most banner year ever. Arguably, me even talking about him put a lot more attention on his stupid nonprofit, and this was my argument in the lawsuit. But here's the interesting part of this, Scott. The revenue goes down after 2017, continues to go back down to the 5-digit numbers of where it was. This is a very small charity that nobody's giving money to. Wait a minute. Now he's got 6 figures. And then the year he announces his death, somehow 2.6 million goes into this thing. And what's interesting is when I started poking on this, the lawsuit suddenly went away. He was dead and the wife had taken it over. And she had also tried to take over this nonprofit. And I was giving a lot of pushback on that. So there's a whole lawfare mess going on with this. Where did this 2.6 million come from? We're talking about the America Project and this network of nonprofit organizations. I think that there is some connection here. I don't have evidence to prove that yet. We got to also be careful how we speak here because these are very litigious individuals who I don't expect that anything that we're saying is incorrect, and we're certainly not going to intentionally say anything false. But that does not fully protect us from them trying to sue us. So just to make it a little easier to talk about this, Scott, in just about 2 minutes, we're going to make our way over to the sponsor exclusive segment. Your subscribers on biggertruthmedia.com and any Crowdsource the Truth subscribers who want to join you on www.biggertruthmedia.com going to be able to watch the sponsor exclusive segment there. It's also going to be on odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth. crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com and subscribestar.com and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. We've got plenty of time to discuss anything you want to, Scott, but just take us out, let everybody know what we're going to get into in this next hour.
Yeah, I think talking about how I think it's really important to look at what happened from November 3rd, 2020 through January 6th, 2021. And then what the plan that was rolled out after that to take over Republican parties and really destroy them. It was an operation to drain them before leading into the 2024 election, drain them of their talent and their treasure. And also to look more in depth at how their network works and how it is that they take over a cause like this. They also took over the election integrity cause. And there's they are, I believe, just looking at their fruit, they are largely responsible for the fact that we really have no improvement whatsoever in our election integrity since 2020, despite the fact that almost all Americans wanted universal mandatory voter ID after the 2020 election. I mean, that's just a simple thing, but we still don't have it. And we have
Yeah.
all these ballots where there's no voter ID whatsoever. And I think that the operations that the Flynn network and those around them within the state parties and all these people that claim to be election integrity experts, but they're really just grifters, with the things that they have done specifically that I've looked at in quite a bit of depth, and the false narratives that they've promoted, and and all of the deception that they've engaged in is largely
Yeah.
responsible for the lack of actual election integrity, even as they cry and claim to be election integrity experts.
I so agree with you, Scott. And, and I could tell just by reading your posts and everything at Bigger Truth on X. But part of the reason why I wanted to start this show with you, and thank you for agreeing to do it, is because you clearly have so much information and so much detail on all of this stuff. And I just love it when someone doing separate research, we can kind of like independently corroborate each other's findings with completely separate evidence. So it's exciting. I hope people will join us. We'll be back in 5 minutes. Thanks for tuning in.